Yeah, it's I love that it was fan started, right? Like this wasn't like a movement by the university or something. It was like somebody in a Facebook group was like, "Hey, we should do this thing," and it slowly gained traction over the course of a summer. And by the time the season rolled around, there were enough people on board that they just kind of took a shot at it. And and it was really born just from kind of a very organic idea,
Mm-hmm.
on social media, which I think is really cool. And being there in person for it, the first time I got to be a part of it was the Iowa Ohio State game a couple of years back, which when we beat them like 55-24, and so like that, night game, like blackout game environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the guy who wrote the song or something was there and played it like at the end of the first quarter, like and you can see, the best part is you can see all of them up there, right? Like they turn on the lights in the children's hospital and you get to see all these kids like pressed up against the glass with their big foam hands and stuff, and their signs like waving down at the stadium, and it's something special, man. It really is.
That's cool. So I'm sure you always wanted to go to Iowa since you were from there and everything. Was there any other schools that kind of like through the recruiting process, like that you were thinking about going to?
Yeah, there was a handful. I think like Georgia Tech, I think was the first school that offered me. But I'm a very qualitative thinker. I'm not a quantitative kind of guy. So going to any school with tech in the name just probably was not going to be a good idea for me. But the other big one, and this one, I think to this day, my mom maybe thinks that I made the wrong choice. But I went to a football camp. Back then you had satellite camps, right? So you could go to like 2 camps in the summer and it would be at a big school. And you'd have like the coaching staff from that school, and then you'd have 30, 40 coaches from like D2, D3 schools and whatnot that would come and help at these camps of like 300, 400 kids. And so you could get dozens of schools' eyes on you in a weekend, at these full-headed camps. And I went to one of these out at Stanford. And I don't even know why I went out there. I had no intention of going to that school or anything. I think we just got like a thing in the mail, like, hey, come to this Stanford, football camp. And I had like a free weekend in the summer. I was like, sure, why the heck not? And so I went out there. And you got to remember, this was before Harbaugh got there. So Stanford was hot garbage, right? They had been terrible for a long time. They hadn't had their turnaround yet. They weren't good. And they wanted me to be a defensive lineman. So I went out and I did the camp, which was a great camp. That campus, holy smokes. I can see, they've got every advantage in, imaginable in recruiting, I would think. They got the academics, they've got the athletics now, they've got the campus. But their football team was terrible, and they wanted me to be a defensive lineman. And they actually offered me before Iowa did. And you think back on things like that and you go, man, a free education from Stanford will go a long way, like in life after football. That probably would have been a pretty solid choice. But at the time I was like, man, I'd rather walk on to play offensive line at Iowa than take a scholarship to play defensive line at Stanford. That's how kind of committed I was. And I was very fortunate that Iowa did end up offering me. Otherwise, that might have been an opportunity that I would have passed on. But fortunately, it all came about in the end. So I'm pretty fortunate that was the case.
Yes. So being and playing at Iowa for that long period of time, I'm sure it was really neat to be able to reunite with a couple of those guys with playing with Philadelphia, like a guy like Bradley Fletcher over the years. I mean, like you got to play with him when you got into your second stint in Philadelphia in 2014, like in a year where Mark Sanchez was the starting quarterback late in the season.
So I mean, B-Flesh was cool. The biggest one for me was Matt Tobin. So when Toby came into Iowa, we nicknamed him Dark Horse because he was a guy who, like, he was at the time he was skinny. I think he walked on, if I'm not mistaken. And he was tiny, like tall, lanky kid, but very, very undersized for an offensive lineman in general, much less a Big Ten offensive lineman. But really sharp technique, super hard worker, picked things up really quickly, very, very smart. And so we named him Dark Horse because it was like, this kid's a dark horse. Like, he is going to be a guy to watch. You pack some muscle on him, you put some pounds on him. He will learn how to play the game the right way when he is small, and then when he is big, he will absolutely dominate people. And so then when he ended up coming to Philadelphia as a free agent, it was kind of like the rebirth of the dark horse. Here he comes, right? Undersized, kid from the countryside in Iowa, but sharp technique, super duper smart kid. He's going to pick things up really quickly, and he ended up having himself a nice little career out there as well. And he's back in Iowa now too, selling like farmland, which is pretty cool. But there were a couple of those guys that come through. I got to talk to Sean Considine, a couple of times because he, of course, was in Philly for a while. And having Bradley Fletcher there, having Marvin McNutt come in for a camp. It was always good to see those guys. Familiar faces in a foreign place are always welcome.
So what goes into like that offensive line room? Like you're in the off season. It's the dead heat of summer. It's July. It's August. How tough is it to maintain that focus? I mean, you guys are professionals. That's what Andy Reid and like that staff told you. But how tough is it in the midst of all of that heat and all of that intensity to keep your cool? Because things escalate. Like people get ticked off if like you step on their foot in a drill, if you're like blood boiling. So how tough is it in a training camp atmosphere when guys are hunting for your jobs and like scenarios like that? Like what was your best advice to yourself, or what did others tell you to keep your cool in the midst of like when your blood's boiling, like you just feel like exploding, like letting it out? Like what was your technique to hone that in and just stay to your craft?
I think it's all about the culture set by the coaching staff. First of all, you want to have a staff that sets the expectation, of calm. You got to understand, especially at that level, that losing your cool in a game can cost you. It can cost your team a drive. It can cost you a score. 15 yards may not seem like much, but you only get so many drives in a game. A 15-yard penalty is very, very hard to overcome. It can get you kicked out of the game. It can cost you money. You can get fined for that stuff. So learning how to temper yourself in practice was equally as much a part of the game as learning your playbook. And most of us, because we were veteran guys, because we've been through this for years and years and years, you just kind of learn to deal with the heat. Plus, nobody wants to fight when it's balls out hot and you're, sweating, out of every single pore in your body. Like, why waste valuable energy, hitting somebody that you're just going to have to line up across from the next play anyway, when you can use that energy on the next play to line up and hit that guy in the right way. So there wasn't a ton of that went on. You'd get some ego things. You'd get some guys who just didn't really like playing with or next to each other. But for the most part, I don't really think the weather really affected us too much. Yes, Alondra. Okay, that's fine. I don't think you guys can split a bag of gummies, Ellie, but you can certainly ask him.
Like you said about
need to get more
keeping your egos in check down there and everything. Obviously, everybody knows, like in the NFL, like some of the skill players, like wide receivers and corners out on the outside, or like talk trash to each other. Does that happen in the offensive line and defensive line? Like, do you trash talk in the trenches at all, or it doesn't happen much?
It depends on the guys. Some guys are really good at it. I'm not a good trash talker. I'm a nice guy. So for me, it's more so, like, hey, it was a good hit, man. Like, all right, I'll get you next time. Like it's more cordial. Plus, for those of us who are kind of, you kind of have these tiers where it's like practice squad guys who, if they sneeze on the, in the wrong direction, they can be cut like that. And then you got those of us who are kind of in the mix, who really are just trying to do every single thing right, because you don't know what one thing that you screw up on what day is going to be the thing that gets you sent home. So trying to just kind of perfect your craft and mind your own business and not cause any trouble, not make waves. That's kind of that middle ground. And then you've got the guys who have like guaranteed contracts and who are established starters, and those guys can afford to talk smack, to throw fists every now and then to get into either play fights or real fights, or they know that if they as long as they keep it on the field and none of it transfers to the locker room, that they're fine. So those guys, if they got to blow off steam, that's what they got to do. But for the rest of us, we're just trying not to get dragged into it, man.
Now, when you're going in between coaches, like an offensive line coach per se, you dealt with Howard Mudd for a year in 2012, and then Jeff Stoutland in your second tier with Philadelphia. What was the biggest difference between what offensive line coaches want from you? Because Jeff Stoutland's been in Philly for a long time now. He constructed the offensive line to go through and win the Super Bowl. So what was the biggest difference between those two guys that you see?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen between offensive line coaches is philosophy. It's your head coach sets the playbook, he sets the standard, he makes the culture. But the offensive line coach, they all have a different mentality about what it is they're trying to do. You can only have two of these, right? These are not like gummies, right?
Vitamin D gummies.
Right, vitamin gummies. Oh, great. And of course, if one wants one, if you give a sister a gummy, then her brother will want one too. There you go. That's all you get of these. I'm going to hang on to them. Okay. So like Howard had a very unique style. Howard believed in the dish. Everything was jump setting, but not just jump setting, like upsetting, like setting into. No, you may not. Like setting up into somebody, right? Stopping his charge before he could even get moving, keeping everyone kind of on this dish is what he called it. But as much separation from the quarterback as possible, and kind of everyone mirroring on the same level. Stoutland, Jeff, Stout was more of a more traditional kind of drop back sort of guy. Where you were kicking at a 45 if you were on the ends and kicking on a 30 if you were a guard. The center would maybe give a little ground, if he had to, but there you were creating a more traditional pocket, like an actual, pocket around the quarterback. So his, like the version of a jump set for him was more of a flat set, whereas with Howard, a jump set was actually attacking the defensive lineman and making it so that every play was almost like a play action in the eyes of the defense. So those guys had very different styles. And then I spent, a month in Tampa on Greg Schiano's staff, which I don't know if anybody will ever hear this, but that was the worst staff I've ever been a part of, the worst team. I can't believe they actually let them coach people. But the offensive line coach there had come from Wisconsin. And so he had more of, kind of like that style. They were more power offense. They had, you may not, you already had one. These are vitamins. So he could only, so his style, that playbook and the way that he was coaching was less oriented to the zone and more oriented to power. So like even the play actions were like power play actions. The style of pulling instead of like getting immediately to the place that you're going and just like opening your hip and running, you'd take like a false step and hinge and then open the opposite direction, and it was supposed to like influence the linebackers. So the philosophies that they had in terms of the angles that you set at and where you meet the pass rusher and how you protect the quarterback were very, very different from coach to coach. And we're all different from what I was taught at Iowa too. So that's kind of, these different schools that kind of develop within offensive line play. You see some similarities from team to team between like who the mentors of certain guys were and what style of offense they run, but matching that style of offensive line to the playbook, to the type of offense that you're running is also very important. So, like, I don't think Howard Mudd would have really done very well in more of a like Chip Kelly style system, just because of the type of like plays that he would teach, the techniques that he would teach you to play with. No, you're not that one. I'm gonna hide these so you can't find them. No.
You're stuck in one man zone right now.
Speaking of
We'll start
vitamin
streaming in a
gummies,
second.
actually, what was, I know with being a professional athlete and everything, you got to have your nutrition in check and everything, and I know Chip was big with that. But was there a big difference, like from college to the NFL, nutritionally wise, or it was all pretty much the same?
Not really. By the time you got there, it was, we all knew what nutrition was at that point. I think the biggest thing that I think Chip really brought to the game of football, and maybe this might just be something that I have noticed and that is much more organic, than just Chip bringing it in. Like, you see the influences of certain people in certain places, like Chip with the up tempo and with his read system and everything. You see elements of that in multiple playbooks. The thing that I've noticed most, I think, is the sports science aspect of it. Chip was a guy who, especially at the college level, the micromanagement of monitoring your players, their hydration, their heartbeats, the conditions of their bodies, what time you're practicing, and how that affects their like circadian rhythms and hormones and things like that. Like that stuff was being done to a certain extent, but I think Chip took it to a whole nother level. And now there are certain aspects of that I have seen, like in Iowa's program, which was always a very traditional program that had done things a very specific way for all of Kirk Ferentz's tenure, going back to his predecessor Hayden Fry. And there's elements of that sports science that I saw in Philadelphia with Chip that he brought in that are now incorporated into the Iowa program. And so I think some of that science and that research, the aspect of it, is more so prevalent today than it was. And I think a lot of that was due to Chip and the success that he had at Oregon with that, treating each player, I don't know if, less as like a position group, as more as each individual person and what they need based on what they've already, based on their performance and how they broke down and how their body handles nutrition. It was micromanagement to a certain extent, but I think it was ultimately good for player development and will lead to healthier, longer careers for guys in the long run, is what I can hope at least. Guys, for the love of God, are you going to knock out all the laundry? You're going to have to pick all that up? All of it. Thank you. 3 laundry baskets down in a matter of seconds.
So with Chip Kelly bringing in some of those new nutritional things, it's pretty safe to say that he didn't have the fast food Tuesdays like Andy Reid had.
That's true. Andy was definitely not worried about nutrition as much, but that again came back to his his philosophy of, you guys are professionals, you know how to handle yourselves. Like, yes, there was brown rice and chicken, but there was also steak, lobster, and cheeseburgers. With Chip, it was brown rice and chicken, like all the time. And then post game, you might get something special. But there was certainly a separate level of care that was paid to nutrition when Chip was around.
Yeah, and we would hear all those stories about those protein shakes too that were made for the players in the locker rooms and everything too. That was a whole other story in itself. And
stuff was delicious, man. That was good stuff. The beet, you have a shot of beet juice to reduce inflammation, and a little protein shot, or creatine shot to and then hydration, and the protein shakes that you could order and stuff. Yeah, it was good, man. It was special stuff.
All right, Julian. Well,
I have 2-year-olds.
That just about wraps it up, unless Kevin has anything else to ask. But we really appreciate you coming on.
Heck yeah, man. Glad I could come out and speak with you guys. This was cool.
Yeah, it was great having you on, Julian. So people can reach out to you. How do they reach out to you?
You can find me on Twitter if you want to, at Vandervelde. I'm on Facebook if you want to find me there. If you're interested in solar power, I'm the vice president of sales for Moxie Solar. We do operate in Pennsylvania. We're in 26 states currently. Philadelphia's actually got some really awesome incentive programs for solar and stuff. So, moxiesolar.com, or you just Google us online, find us, and hit us up. We're always happy to help people harness the power of the sun.
Will do. Thank you, Julian. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day, to say the least, to come on and speak with us.
I apologize about the children, but they make life interesting. So,
yeah.
Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Thank you.